Today's video was inspired when I saw this video from another creator, and I thought to myself, yes, that is the perfect topic to discuss during the month of February. But of course, I wanted to explore the era of the 1940s, a time when we think of dating as a more romantic, old school, slower and organic affair than today's modern dating landscape of swiping right and sliding into each other's DMs. But was dating for our grandparents really as rosy as we'd like to believe? In classic films, they like to push the characters fairly quickly into everlasting love, often not showing the long periods of courtship that many couples would have experienced because, let's face it, that doesn't really make for a very interesting movie. But courtship was paramount during the 1940s, and the term going steady was frequently used to describe a relationship with one person exclusively. But as of the 1950s, this had become a lot more casual, as teens would often date multiple partners before choosing one to go steady with. And then even then, they would often break this off, sometimes not even formally, before dating another fella or gal. But during World War II, the idea of going steady was a much more solid concept and a shift from the more casual dating practices that we'd seen in the past. Instead of having multiple dates, this was a shift away from competitive dating, where the primary goal was to have the most and best dating partners. And this was likely due to military service. War created a sense of urgency where people would marry very, very quickly after meeting someone that they felt compatible with. So it became less about competition and simply about compatibility. But although marriages tended to happen quickly, courting was still very prevalent and was very much the long game. And if separated by war, couples would tend to write to each other. And these letters would be heartfelt, sometimes containing poetry and talks of the future. And they would provide a vital morale boost for soldiers at war, giving them something to keep fighting for. As well as this, living together before marriage was simply not done, which in turn made for longer courtships. But there was still an undercurrent of desperation, and many parents would expect their daughters to be married by the age of 20, and they would not look too kindly to the dowdy women still living at home, housekeeping for them or their brothers, and financially dependent on their parents, save for a shopkeeper or typist job here and there. Sadly, these women's only hope for a life outside of this, or to escape their parents' palpable disappointment, tended to be marriage. Parents were so desperate for their daughters to be married that scarcely educated girls who had failed to find a husband were literally shipped off to India to meet lonely men serving in the British Indian Empire. And this was known as the fishing fleet. A little different from Plenty of Fish. And although you may be thinking, what's the harm? What are they really going to get up to? They're just going to go on a few charming dates because everything was much more straight-laced back then. Well, that's not entirely true. Because although living together and even public displays of affection were heavily frowned upon, accidental pregnancies did play a part in quick marriages, particularly during a time when contraception wasn't as easily accessible and the birth control pill didn't become available until the 60s. Plus, there was the simple fact that military units had certain benefits if you were a married man, and widows would be looked after financially if the worst happened. Marriages were also much smaller affairs and so could happen much more quickly, versus today's long engagements and incredibly lavish weddings that sometimes just feel like a huge party. Handmade wedding dresses and a quick trip to the church were about all you could expect during this period of hardship. Plus, if the men were marrying whilst they were on leave, then there were time constraints about when they must return to base. Of course, don't get me wrong, old-fashioned love at first sight of course played a role as well, but we'll get to that later. But despite the palpable desperation, men and women alike had certain and quite specific expectations for their prospective partners, and this very much came to light after Britain's first ever dating bureau was set up in 1939, ran by two single women, may I add. And don't worry, because I will very much be covering that story in another video. So let's settle in and take a look at some of the ideal matches that men and women were looking for during the 1940s. And seriously, you're going to want to grab a hot drink for this section because some of these are golden. Women seeking men when it comes to money. He must have enough income to make a settlement of about £400 and be able to keep me in comfort and perhaps travel after the war. I mean, a woman that knows what she wants, can we blame her? The income does not mean as much to me as happiness and real companionship. I mean, that for me is the basis of a happy relationship. In my humble opinion, if you're entering into a marriage solely with money on your mind, then you're liable to be disappointed and they're going to feel pressured to live up to your standards. Just a recipe for disaster. Okay, men seeking women when it comes to money. A girl who has not been used to much money. Now that to me says that he is someone that doesn't come from a lot, and so he doesn't want to date a girl who has come from a lot because, like I said before, he won't be able to meet her expectations. I like it. I think he's being honest, and I think that will do favours for him in the future, even though this is in the past. Who would like me and marry me for myself, not my income. Oh, I hope he found someone. Women seeking men when it comes to intimacy. Not amorous. Full stop. Okay? I mean, it's best to be honest. Physical attraction in some small degree. Because, yeah, I guess we want to be partially attracted to the person we're going to spend the rest of our lives with, maybe. I don't know. Men seeking women when it comes to intimacy. Attractive and chaste. Must have bedroom appeal. No, I don't think I have bedroom appeal at all. A passionate and loving nature. There we go. That's what we want to see. Women seeking men when it comes to children. A man who desires children and can hope to employ domestic help. If a widower, definitely no children, though I do not dislike children. Okay, she's a woman that doesn't want the baggage. And you know what? You've got to respect her for setting those boundaries. Must not want children because I cannot have any. Oh, bless her. Men seeking women when it comes to children. I require primarily a mother for my children, and therefore a genuine fondness and sympathy with the young is essential. I mean, we were going to see a requirement like this because it's the 1940s and traditional gender roles were much more prevalent and society put pressure on people to adhere to them. No children, but if really very nice, a child overlooked. Lucky kid. Women seeking... I'm sorry, some of these are they're absolutely priceless. Women seeking men when it comes to looks. I don't mind how ugly. But you know what? That's good. I would have phrased it differently, I think, if I was filling out my admission form for this dating bureau. I probably would have worded it slightly differently. Like, looks not important to me, maybe, rather than I don't mind how ugly. That's just brilliant. No one with false teeth. Okay, I mean, sure. Personal cleanliness is important. I very much agree. I have a few icks when it comes to personal hygiene, some things that I just can't get past. And so, yeah, I feel her. Preferably good looks, golden hair and blue eyes. If not available, any decent type will do. What is she doing? Placing an Amazon order? This is just... Oh, it's excellent. Okay, men seeking women when it comes to looks. No false dentures. Wow. There must have been a big dental crisis in the 1940s, which I'm not surprised about. By the way, he is 35 and he wants a girl that's aged 20 to 26. I'm saying nothing. Not too handsome, but with supple, well-proportioned figure. Say a lady with theatrical or modelling experience. Let's just build a girlfriend, huh? Very wealthy or devastatingly beautiful. Because obviously, if you're not wealthy, you got to bring something to the table. I mean, come on, sweetheart. No thick ankles or short, podgy fingers. That is so specific. Like, who hurt this man? Has he been burnt by this before? And so now it's just an absolute no. Your fingers have to be a certain length or, you know, the deal's off. Brilliant. Let's put the superficial aside for a second and find out what women seek in men when it comes to character. Only tender-hearted. Now, that's the kind of thing I expect to see in the 1940s. A man of character. I do not mind if he is a war wreck. Ugh, that's, yeah, there would have been plenty of those around. Tolerant outlook towards other people and their affairs. I love a bit of tolerance, me. I think tolerance is something that's not talked about enough because I think when you're tolerant of others, it lessens your judgment on others. It makes you a more well-rounded and grounded person. It makes it easier for you to interact with different people, get different perspectives that you might not otherwise have gotten. Yeah, tolerance is a really good one. Patient. Not more selfish than most men. Girl, I hear you. Yeah, she's definitely been... That's speaking from experience. You can just tell, can't you? Okay, men seeking women when it comes to character. Domesticated and full of exuberance. Okay, so you want her to thrive in a homemaking setting, but still have a lot of character. Okay? Bright, good sport, and will take the bad with the good. Absolutely. Now, I am sometimes a bit too much of a pessimist, and it's really something that I've got to work on. I'm a bit of a doomsday prophet. I always think the worst. And actually, I sometimes need to learn to take the bad with the good and not let the bad send me into a spiral as much as it does. And also take time to appreciate the good, which I'm not always good at doing. So yeah, very good one. Not lazy or bored. Yeah. Women seeking men when it comes to education. Educated, good-looking, self-assured, mechanically minded, handy round the house, must have wavy hair. That's sidle Latin right there. If you're all of those things but you have a bowl cut, just know you're out. Engineers preferred, but any really well-educated man except actors or theologists. Well, I'll try not to take that personally. I too was an actor. I mean, you could argue that I still am an actor, or at least I'm still a creative. Would I date other actors? I can imagine it being a lot. So, props to her for setting those boundaries now. Educated, of high principles, sensible but not dull, and not frantically religious. I think they're all very sensible. Men seeking women when it comes to education. Must be smart and intelligent rather than empty-headed and pretty. I have nothing to say. Intelligent, but uninformed in national affairs. Now, that is not the first time I've seen a comment like that come up when I've studied women throughout history and the expectations that were put upon them. Because there was this idea that you better have something about you, you better not be a complete airhead, but you also better not have any notion about grand, manly things like politics. That's for the men to discuss. You're there to be witty, charming, beautiful, and maybe make them laugh a little. It just seems to be a thing. Women weren't expected to give their opinion on male topics. Sorry about the air quotes. Sufficiently educated to make a fair success of a Times crossword puzzle. Well, that would be me out. Women seeking men when it comes to abilities. Able to manage income tax papers, etc., but not too clever. Oh, shoes on the other foot now. Why would she not want him to be too clever? I wonder if it's because she doesn't feel clever herself. And so if she met someone that was too clever, she'd feel, that she couldn't really keep up with them intellectually and she'd be a disappointment to them, maybe? I don't know, just surmising. Preferably one who can darn his own socks. Abso-bloody-lutely. I can't really darn my own socks though, which is absolutely terrible. I'm really exposing myself there. But my boyfriend can. My boyfriend can darn his own socks. And he is going to teach me. Honestly, modern relationships, what are they like, eh? Men seeking women when it comes to abilities. One who can swim and is of lively disposition. I can do both those things. Secretarial experience and advantage. Able to play a portable instrument, string or woodwind. Why? Must be a good cook, able to make jam, dress poultry and rabbits. Must reside in Yorkshire. Just a little side note there. Which brings us on to women seeking men regards location. Not living in or near Southport. So if you're from Southport, I don't know what you're doing wrong, but she ain't touching you with a barge pole. Men seeking women. No sulking. Lives near Wembley. Women seeking men regarding values. One who looks on marriage as a serious partnership. No time wasters here. Someone interested in doing good in the world, connecting with the church, schools and children, etc. An idealist, someone with vision. I like that. Not too serious, as I am shallow emotionally. Who wrote that? That's excellent. What were we on? Oh yes, values. So men seeking women when it comes to values. Someone who has helped old age pensioners or the sick. Having Christian ideals and good character, anxious to help others. Family. Women seeking men. I would prefer his mother and grandmother to be... Why? My goodness. And men seeking women, her parents must be happily married. Now that's a lot more... That's a lot nicer than, I hope some of his family aren't here anymore. And then just a general top tier comment to end this section. Women seeking men would like to meet just an ordinary man. I think many people out there can relate. Oh, this will not do. That's better. So clearly we can see that expectations for both men and women were very specific. But regardless, before World War II, when women were called into the workforce, they had a particular part to play and were expected to revert back to this after the war. And this was, of course, in a domestic setting, centred in child rearing, homemaking, and tending to their husband's needs. And yet many women felt very ill at ease with these expectations. And in the UK, there was even something called the marriage bar, which was a policy that prevented married women from working certain jobs. And this policy was common in the UK from the 19th century all the way to the 1960s. It required women to actually resign from their jobs once getting married, and was particularly prevalent in the civil service and other white-collar jobs like banking. The policy was based on the assumption that married women didn't need to work because they would be occupied by home and family life. And many women wouldn't argue with that because marriage was expected and allegedly a way for a woman to live a better life than staying at home with her parents, which carried its own social stigma, as we've already explored. And what we also can't forget when we're exploring dating culture throughout history is that often much younger girls would be married off to much older men. I mean, we've all seen this video.
I met him, and he wouldn't leave my father's store for 3 weeks. He camped outside. He would throw rocks through my window with notes that said, "Please go out with me." Grandma, you little victim. What the f***?
However, thankfully, the median age for a woman to get married during the 1940s was 21 years old, which was actually older than the age of people getting married in the past. However, after World War II, the age at which people got married did decrease. Also, it was increasingly difficult for women particularly to get married after the age of 30, and they would often be known as spinsters. Spinster or old maid is a term referring to an unmarried woman who is older than what is perceived as the prime age range during which women usually marry. It can also indicate that a woman is considered unlikely to ever marry. The term originally indicated a woman whose occupation was to spin. And also what we can't forget is that this video doesn't cover the different expectations for marriage throughout the 1940s depending on where you lived and your culture, where the age of marriage can be eye-wateringly young for girls and the age gaps sometimes unthinkable. But I suppose the point is that there were often expectations placed upon women on how they were to appease men. And we can see this quite frightfully displayed in Thomas D. Horton's book, What Men Don't Like About Women, released in 1945. This spanned men's disdain to women thinking that they were intellectually equal to their male counterparts, their bedroom manners, and daring to admit they'd had partners before. And seriously, this man pulls no punches, and he talks in great detail about his dislike to women who are bosses, women over the telephone, women as correspondents and telegram senders, women in the office, women as engaged animals, women as readers, critics and authors, women and clothes, their men's. Some things never change, eh? Women and other men, women as rejected sweethearts, and it goes on, and it goes on, and it goes on. Women as flirts, women as dinner companions, women as theatre, concert, movie and walking companions, women as drinkers, women as friends' wives. Who hurt you, Thomas? Who hurt you? I don't want to go too deeply into this because it is the month of Valentine's after all, and I want to keep love at the helm, but seeing as we are talking about dating culture, here is a few extracts from his book that stood out to me. Of course, women should cooperate with men, but they should do it with the same gentleness with which a flower bends to a breeze. They also assume that since they are in a state of nature with a man, they are his intellectual equal. So they blab and blab, taxing the man's patience no end. What he really wants are quiet, rest and sleep. Trying to build a meaningful connection with a man you share a bed with. How dare you! Also, in the US educational film Teen Dating Do's and Don'ts, they place quite a lot of importance on a girl's looks, girls not coming across as superior, and the expected dating etiquette. So sadly, although we'd all like to see the 1940s as the era of romance, sexism was still very prevalent and traditional gender roles were very much the order of the day. Me little cherub's fallen. I don't think that this is Cupid, but I thought that he looked like Cupid, so that's why I'm wearing him today, because although everything we've gone through is pretty heavy, I'm still very much a hopeless romantic at heart. And this video is also not covering the topic of sexuality, which stands for both men and women, and the challenges that interracial couples would have faced. Finding the right match was a minefield for those that did not conform to social norms. Gay marriage was not legal in Britain in the 1940s, and homosexuality was still a criminal offence all the way up until 1967. Now, interracial marriage was not illegal during Britain in the 1940s, and there have never been laws in Britain preventing people of different races from getting married. However, what these couples would have faced would have been isolation and discrimination on a daily basis. But what I must say is that nothing warms my heart more than when I come across a story of a couple that has managed to stay together all these decades later in spite of all that social stigma they faced. They truly fought for love. And love won. Sadly, the war did cause many marriages to end, leading to an increase in divorces in the 1950s. And although divorce rights for women were significantly limited compared to today's standards, some legal reforms in the preceding decades had made it slightly easier for women to seek divorce. Why am I having to turn a light on at 2 o'clock in the afternoon? So are films like The Notebook simply lying to us? Of course not. My own grandparents were the perfect example of an everlasting love that spanned across 60 years of marriage. And no, they weren't married during the 1940s because they were still babies then, but there have been many tales of long-lasting, loving marriages that all began in this era of courtship where having a walk along the river or sharing a cup of tea was more than enough to build a meaningful connection. The charm of dating in this era is that dates were simple, perhaps more innocent, and people weren't distracted by technology or spoiled by it. No, if you wanted to ask a girl out, you would have to physically make the journey to her home, pick up the telephone if she had one and call her, or write her a letter. There truly was a conscious effort to keep the romance fires burning. Dates had to be creative, especially during the period of the Second World War. And you wouldn't just be meeting the girl or the fella, you'd be meeting their entire family, and that was held in great importance. Plus, during a period of war, love really did span the distance, and tragically, not always with a happy ending. We look back on these times not with rose-tinted glasses, but with an appreciation for the authentic moments that people shared in a slower-paced world and literally against all odds. No, we can't ignore the expected gender roles, the outdated sexism, the social stigma for unmarried people, the criminalisation of homosexuality, women's rights, and the cultural differences depending on where you lived. But what we can appreciate is that there was genuine effort put into love, not only finding it, but maintaining it, which is a stark difference from our very throwaway world that we're currently living in and the absolute dire dating scene. Plus, with Valentine's Day just around the corner, I certainly don't want to be telling people that romance is not only dead today, but always has been. Because it hasn't, okay? It genuinely hasn't. And those stories that you hear that have ended in a long-lasting, beautiful marriage where they met in the 1940s during an unthinkable period of history are real. They are genuine. And they are a lovely thing to dream about for ourselves, that idea of hopeless romance and being intertwined with somebody that you were always destined to be with, you know, two souls connected by a thread. I love that idea, and it really does happen. But there were also examples when things weren't so rosy and things didn't always end in a happy ending, but that's true of any point in history. And does the media hamp this up and usually skirt around the less glamorous nitty-gritty issues? Of course, but that doesn't mean that we can't move through our life in the name of love. Any love, doesn't have to be romantic love. For me, I am grateful that being married is no longer the sole measure of my achievements, and if we are out there looking for love or hoping to keep our own fires burning, then I truly believe that there are aspects of romance that we can adopt to get to know the person that's in front of us in a way that not only feels timeless, but truly stands the test of time. Which you'll see from me next week when I get ready to go on a Valentine's date with my partner, but we do it in a 1940s way. Until next week, love you.